It's a Friday afternoon. I just saw that we've reached 700 subscribers here, so it's so exciting. And I wanted to celebrate that as well as talk about sort of a week in the life of a claims agent. I'm coming up on 4 months now as a claims agent. Hold on, let me count. So June 5th was my official first day. So June to July, August, September, October. So yeah, 4 months now. Anyway, so I've been attracting clients in wonderful ways, including through YouTube, and serving those clients and just starting to get my rhythm of how things go. And I thought I'd share with you some results of a informal conference I had this week for a client. So it was when you request or when you put in for a higher level review for something, you can request an informal conference, and you can do that yourself, just without any representation. You can get an informal conference, or if you have representation, if you have a claims agent like myself or a lawyer or an accredited someone representing you, they can have an informal conference on your behalf. And it's exactly what it sounds like. It's a conversation between you and the rater, the person who's looking at your claim, and you just point out to them what they got wrong. So a higher level review means you did not submit any new evidence. You think that the evidence they have is enough and they've just not considered it correctly. And so you just make your case. So in the case for my clients, when I submit a higher level review for a client, I submit the actual form, the higher level review form, and then I also submit a cover letter where I outline for the rater, hey, this is what went wrong. But then I also request, most of the time, I also request an informal conference so that we can talk about it. And if they have any questions, I can clarify, or vice versa. So on Monday, I had an informal conference on behalf of a client. And for the first time, this client requested that to be part of the conversation. So I was able to conference them in. And so the veteran was on the call. I was on the call as his representative. And then the higher level review officer was on the call. And all we did was point out to him what went wrong, what they did not consider, and what they needed to consider. And specifically in this case, the person had a job that was very obvious that they had jet fuel exposure, and yet their TERA, the TERA memo did not reflect that they had the exposure. Oh my goodness. Okay, so I just went from like 5 viewers to 30, so I don't know what happened, but hi. Happy to have you here. I'm talking about VA things and higher level reviews specifically. So if you're a veteran and you're curious about those things, that's what this video is going to talk about. So in this case, the veteran had jet fuel exposure as part of his job, and yet because he was never deployed, the TERA memo, they just overlooked the fact that his MOS had jet fuel exposure. So I'm gonna have to find a way to like take comments off or something. This is distracting. If you do have any questions, I'm happy to address them at the end. So there you go. All right. So his TERA memo was it just said he had no toxic exposures, and therefore basically all the things that he claimed were denied because they weren't tied to service because he had no toxic exposures according to this, the official document from VA. And so on the call, I just said, the baseline thing we need to do is correct this TERA memo and have it reflect the toxic exposures he had in service. And the reviewer agreed. We got off the phone. By that afternoon, it had already been done. The memo, TERA memo, had been updated. And then the decision on the higher level review was duty to assist, meaning VA realized they didn't consider everything they should have, and they have a duty to assist the veteran. And so they're going to reconsider those claims in light of that information that they didn't consider before. So that's a win, right? One thing that I want to point out, in addition to making sure that your TERA memo adequately reflects the exposures you had in service, also, when your higher level review decision comes back as a duty to assist, that means your claim isn't done yet. They've just transferred it from a higher level review into a supplemental claim. And that means you can submit new evidence. So, and it's not really ever laid out that way, because when they send you the decision letter that says VA found a duty to assist error, and we're going to reconsider all of your claims in light of the new information that we ignored before or we didn't see before. Well, that means now you can submit new evidence, because now it's a supplemental claim. And so in the case of my client, we had the call on Monday. The rest of the week, I found all the studies and evidence that we needed to tie the issues that he's having, the health issues he's having, to jet fuel exposure now that VA has conceded jet fuel exposure. And so I put it all together in a nice, pretty document. I outlined for VA, here's all the issues that my veteran is having. Here's all the studies that show that that is tied to his jet fuel exposure. Now you have all the reason you need to give him service connection. So I wanted to point out those two things. One, that your TERA memo needs to actually reflect your exposures in service, and sometimes, a lot of times, they miss exposures related to your MOS. So that's something to pay attention to. And the other thing is, once your higher level review is decided, if it is decided that it is a duty to assist error, then it turns into a supplemental claim, and if you have additional evidence, you can submit it, as well as personal statements. Those are always helpful. I find a lot of times my clients haven't done those before, and that can be incredibly helpful to give the rater and the VA an idea of how your service-connected conditions are affecting your life. So those are my tips from the experience I had this week helping a client with a higher level review. Now I'm going to continue and talk about the rest of the things that I did this week, just to give you an idea of like a week in the life of a claims agent and all of the different things that we help our clients with, because it is there's a variety of things, and it makes life really interesting. It keeps us on our toes. It's one of the reasons I love this work. So I made a list. I had that higher level review call, which we've talked about. I had 2 new client calls. So people that have found me either through referrals or through YouTube. You can fill out just a short survey that talks about your military service and any of your claims experience. And then you can get on my calendar and we have a short conversation to see if it would be a good fit to work together. So I had 2 of those this week. One of those has turned into a client. They've returned the paperwork, and now I have a new client. Then I have 3 intake interviews where people who have already become clients, when they return the paperwork, I then send that paperwork to VA, and it takes VA sometimes 2 or 3 weeks to process that paperwork. But once they do, and I become the representative of record for these veterans, then I have access to all of their records. And so it's the system is called VBMS, Veteran Benefit Management System. And so once I get access to their record in VBMS, then I create a big document about all of the claims that they've done before and what I can see has gone right or has gone wrong, things that we can do to further those claims or do a supplemental or do a higher level review, that kind of thing. So I had 3 new clients that we did intake interviews for, and then inevitably after those conversations, I email them with a list of, okay, here's some things that I need from you, and here's some things that I'm going to do. Things like things that I would need from a client would be medical records, personal statements, I guess those are the two big things. That, you know, those are things that I, as a claims agent or anyone who's a representative of someone, we can't write your personal statement for you. We can help you, but that's something that has to come from you. And then getting medical records, you know, technically VA can request them. I have not found that to be helpful at all because VA is a big system and most medical places are big systems, and those systems don't cooperate very often. So it's always helpful if you can get your own medical records and like submit them yourself. That's always helpful. And then let's see. Oh, I had one existing client who I had a follow-up call with. So lots of phone calls. And then as far as actual like things submitted, I submitted an intent to file for a client. I requested records from National Archive for a client. I also received records from National Archive for a client, which is super fun. I submitted 2 supplemental claims and 1 higher level review. So it was a busy week, a very full week, but all good stuff. And specifically, I just also want to highlight this National Archive request that I did. So when you do your very first claim with VA requests your records from National Archive. And most of the time, they get them, but not all of the time. So specifically, if you served in the National Guard, I'm finding that those records are not usually, something happens to those records and they can get lost more so than people on active duty, I have found. So in the case of this client, in conversation, like he had done many claims before, but VA never had any of his medical records from service. And at least some of his medical things happened at a hospital. And so hospital records are sometimes in a different database than regular records, than your regular military medical records. So I've submitted a request through National Archive. I've outlined for them the years that this man was serving and the base where he was serving and the hospital where he would have gotten treatment. And I've asked them to look in the hospital database to see if there's any records there. And if so, please send them. So fingers crossed for that. And I will say, I know to ask for that because it has worked for another client. So the records that I received this week for a different client it's almost the same case. So this veteran served, he was in the National Guard. We've requested his records and we got a whole 4 pages. 4 pages, and 2 of them were blank. So it was, and 1 is a copy of like the front of the folder. So there's really only 1 like usable record from this person's service. It's sad. So specifically, we wanted his medical records, which we did not get, and it was going to make the job really hard, right? And it's incredibly difficult to do a claim if you have no evidence of treatment in service or injuries in service. So I kept going round and round with the state where he had served in the National Guard, and then those people said National Archive had the record. National Archive said, no, go talk to the state. And eventually I talked to a person in National Archive who was like, listen, I promise we've tried. We've really, really looked. I'm not saying your guy didn't serve, but I am saying I don't have his stuff. To which I was like, ugh, you know, it's just, that was really hard to hear. But then I said, I'm really wanting to find his record because he had an injury in boot camp that he's still suffering the consequences from. And he was hospitalized for several days. And the person on the phone from National Archive went, hospital? And I was like, yeah. And he said, oh, that's a totally different database. Do you know what year? And I did. Do you know what base? And I did. Found him. Found him. It was like Christmas morning. I was so excited. And it took them a few weeks. I'm getting chills now just talking about it. It took them a few weeks to actually get the physical record. So they could see in the database that it existed, but it was way pre-digitized things. So they had to go physically find the record, and then they had to redact any information that we weren't supposed to have. Blah blah blah. But they sent it. I got it today. Again, like just felt like my birthday or something really fun. And I was able to share that with the client. It has everything that we need for the claim. So that's, part of the list for next week is getting that claim done. And I'm super excited to be able to do that. So, all right, that ends all the things that I wanted to talk about. I'm gonna look at comments now and see if there's anything that I need to. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh boy, that happens. Okay. Oh, and somebody wants me to play the harp. I am not playing the harp today. Okay, well, that's all. All right. Well, it's been lovely spending this 15-20 minutes with y'all. Thank you for being here. If you have any questions, like when you're watching this back, please put them in the comments and I will do my best to respond. Have a great weekend, and thanks again for being here.